I think our host will connect us all at 6 o'clock. Thank you. Okay, Assalamu alaikum. Good evening, everyone, and welcome. This is a presentation by the Minara Chamber of Commerce, and we're hosting tonight a prominent organization known as Outa, represented by Wayne Duvenage and Rudie Heyneke. Outa really needs very little introduction, but I think to be fair, we need to have a background of Outa is because of the importance that they've had and they've played in recent times and historically in this country. But tonight we'll be talking about state capture and the impact that it has on the economy. And by way of introduction, I'd like to invite Wayne. Wayne, good evening. Introduce yourself and your organization, please.
Yeah, good evening, Ashraf, and thanks for the opportunity. Nice to be with you and your viewers and your members. Yeah, I'm the CEO of an organization called the Organization Undoing Tax Abuse. The acronym is Outa. It wasn't always named that, as you might know. We started the whole organization under the e-toll matter. In those days, in 2012, when we formed the organization, it was the Opposition to Urban Tolling Alliance, the same acronym. And as we grew, and I don't know if you want me to elaborate on that now or a bit later, but I can talk to you a little bit about how we got to where we are. It's quite an interesting story. You want me to give you that in a nutshell now?
Yes, I think just take us through it for a few minutes, please.
Yeah, so you know, at the outset, we were very concerned when government made a decision to thrust upon the Gauteng society a new mechanism of tolling. Now, we're not against the technology. The technology works around the world, and we're not against you know, tolling as such, because we've seen how build, operate, and transfer engagements with public-private partnerships give wealth to the country in building infrastructure. There's nothing wrong with that. But when these projects are introduced and they are overpriced and they're administratively burdensome and they do not follow due process when it comes to public engagement, then society has a right to stand up and ask questions. And when we started to do that in 2010, by the way, and 2011, we engaged heavily with government. We could see very clearly something was fundamentally wrong. The road construction costs would double the price. The whole tender for the e-tolling mechanism was fraught with overpricing and corruption was coming to the fore there. And the scheme was never going to succeed. So we set out to challenge it, through initially a court process and then a whole public engagement process and then a civil disobedience program. And it's very necessary that society involves itself in civil disobedience where it's warranted. That is when government refuses to listen to its citizens. And to cut a long story short, we took this battle on behalf of the public. The public came on board and supported us, but they supported us because we were supporting them in the litigation that might flow if they were summoned. It was this good relationship, and out of this was born this organization. And then we started getting questions from the public saying, why just e-tolls? You guys have a strategy here. Why aren't you tackling broader corruption? And that's where in 2016 we changed our name, broadened our mandate, and we grew from literally a 3 to 4 person team to now 45 people. And our modus operandi is very clear. We wanted to ensure that we employed professional people to bring this fight to government, to tackle maladministration and corrupt use of taxpayers' money. We needed to do so by having a litigation war chest and legal people that can build cases fast and smartly and cheaply without enriching big law firms. And so we got legal specialists, and that's where Rudie joined us as well. Then we've got investigation specialists, where Rudie also works, and we've got communication specialists. And with those 3 operating components, we put together this mechanism, this project-minded mechanism to tackle corruption head-on. And we've opened in the last 4 years over 170 projects. There's probably about 70 still open at any one time because they take ages, some of these projects. And we hold people to account. We lay charges against ministers, against DGs, against people in state-owned institutions, and we take this matter head on. A lot of that is around state capture. Rudie's got some exciting stuff to share with you, how we do this work and how important it is for us to get information from whistleblowers. The Gupta leaks he'll feature, but that's Outa in a nutshell. Today, as I said, 45 people, professional, passionate people, remunerated through citizens, ordinary citizens, giving us small donations of 100 Rand a month or so. We call it active citizenry. It's crowdfunding for prosperity of our country. And the work we do, ultimately, the more we can stop corruption and misspending of taxpayers' money, the more money flows to where it should, which is mainly the poor that benefit, the destitute that benefit through better education, health services, housing, water, and so forth. Most middle class and wealthy people can fend for themselves, but it's the poor that suffer the most when our money is wasted. So that's Outa in a nutshell. That's how we got here, and I can tell you it's an awesome team, backed up by awesome citizens who support us, and we have a lot of energy in this organization.
Thank you, Wayne. I don't think we can add anything to that introduction. It was so comprehensive, going back from your early days, your mandate. But I think the thing that struck me most was active citizenry and the fact that you can have civil disobedience in this time and its age, and it doesn't have to be against the state. It doesn't have to be seen as opposition. It can be seen as demanding one's civil rights in terms of the Constitution and holding officials accountable and people accountable for what they do. I think what you're saying is they're using democracy at work. Without further ado, Rudie is part of the legal team and research. I'm not going to take too many words to introduce him. I'd like him to introduce himself and tell us about the sterling work regarding specifically state capture, how it's come about, etc. Rudie, over to you. Oh, I think, yeah, there you go.
Thank you, Ashraf. Yes, I joined Outa in the first quarter of 2016 in the investigations department, moved on, and in 2017, we a copy of the Gupta leaks, and we started to look into that, and it evolved. We, in late 2017, we published a report that we submitted to Parliament, the President Caught in the Act, No Room to Hide report, as it is commonly known, where we took evidence and information from the Gupta leaks and compiled it into one report of thousands of pages of evidence, mails, documents, etc., etc. And at that stage already, we presented it to Parliament and we said, this is what is happening in our country right now. And the purpose thereof was to alert parliamentarians to see what was happening and what we could find at that stage. Now, interesting question is, how did state capture happen? How did it come about? And that question tickled me a lot. And we started to go back into time and see where did this start off? What happened? And I like to categorize it, make it two categories. I'll talk about the theory and then the reality, and we will see, where theory and reality meet each other later on in this past decade, just more than a decade. On the theory side, and just by saying this as well, state capture, as we talk about it tonight, there's a lot of forms of state capture, and state capture is still happening in our country. But I will concentrate on the role of the Guptas, Salim Essa, the Zumas, and so forth. Now, if we go back in time, around about 2008, Jay Gupta was appointed as a board member to the Brand SA board. Now, this is an entity that was established by former President Thabo Mbeki to promote the country, get investments, promote tourism, and just market the country all over the globe. Now, interestingly enough, Jay Gupta was introduced by Essop, and he became a board member. Interestingly is that this is an entity that wants to promote South Africa, and Jay Gupta was the only foreigner on this board. Theory again has it that he didn't do much except for two incidents or 2 times when he featured very predominantly in the brand SA. The first was when former President Zuma went on an Indian state visit where he took over the show, they say. And second thing was when they launched the New Age newspaper. And shortly after that, ANN7, sorry. CNN will not like me to compare them with ANN7. At Brand SA, Jay Gupta, had the opportunity to rub shoulders with a lot of politicians, businessmen, civil society organization leaders, and so forth. The likes of Cheryl Carolus, Dali Mpofu, Koos Becker of MultiChoice, and one interesting name, Iqbal Sharma, who was at that time working at DTI. Now, if we move a bit forward, we know in 2009, Zuma became president, and the first real State of the Nation address, there was one in 2009, but the real first State Nation of the address, State of the Nation address was on 11 February 2010. And there a very significant and important announcement was made when former President Zuma announced that the government will make available 846 billion rand for infrastructure development. Now, why this is so significant is because if we look at the process, when the head of state announced something like that, the next step will be for the Minister of Finance to make available that money to the different departments. And 300 billion rand was made available for Transnet. And we can sit here and talk for 2 or 3 or 7 webinars about state capture, but I'm going to try and concentrate on especially on Transnet, what happened there. Now, as this money was made available, some other things significantly took place, and that was appointments by the president. He appointed ministers, and most importantly, Malusi Gigaba was appointed Minister of Public Enterprises. He was a Deputy Minister at Home Affairs at that time, and he was appointed 1st of November 2010. Shortly after that, Gigaba appointed a new board at Transnet. And what is very interesting is that even before the board was announced, and even before there was talks of a new CEO, the New Age newspaper, wrote articles, a full-page article on Brian Molefe, and that was, and I retrieved the specific newspaper. It was on the 7th of December 2010. Now, interestingly, Molefe was only appointed in 2011, end of February, beginning of March. But in that article, it was already said that Molefe will take over the reins at Transnet. And there was some of the board members that the board at that time was not appointed yet, also names made available to the public. Interestingly enough, and this is information that we have, and now we're talking about reality. Reality is coming into play. Is very confidential information that we received, and we receive a lot of information via whistleblowers and people who really want to make a difference. Was that Mr. Iqbal Sharma, who was also one of the board members at Brand SA, was appointed to the board. The original list of board members that was presented to the minister didn't show his name. But at number 99, the minister, Gigaba, changed the names, and he took off the only rail expert that was on the board, took that person off and substituted it with Iqbal Sharma. And that is also very significant because later on, theory again, read about it. I haven't seen the cabinet minutes, but they say that Gigaba wanted to appoint Sharma as the Transnet chair, but that didn't happen. And but what then happened is that they formed a new committee, the BADC, that will preside over all big acquisitions more than 5 billion rand. And that was actually the board, members deciding on the acquisition of the locomotives. Now, if we go a bit further, and we see that Molefe was appointed in March 2011, 1st of March. Anosh Singh, strangely enough, he was at Transnet already. He was the acting CFO, became appointed as the permanent CFO. And what also happened is that the delegation of authority increased, where it was $2 billion in 2010, 2011, it moved up to $6 billion in 2013. And that is the amount now that the board could make a decision over, that they can, let's say, play around with and do what they have to do in accordance with the shareholders' compact. And then I'm not going to go into too much detail, but there was, Transnet said that we need new locomotives. With each and every contract that was signed with the Chinese locomotive manufacturers, there was a problem. On the 95, the first contract, it was a story of, we cannot do this in confinement, and Iqbal Sharma twisted that around, and eventually it was awarded to CSR. Then the 100 came, the 1064, the big contract, was already on the table, and then Sabonga Gama came and said, listen, this 1064 contract is going to take so long, and we need locomotives very urgently. We need another 100 electric locomotives. And that was pushed through on confinement by the same committee of the board. And then of the 1064, and with, like I said, without going into details, we know about the price that went up from 38 billion rand to 54 billion rand, and there's a lot of evidence, and this is part of reality as well. There's a lot of evidence, a lot of forensic investigations that were done, and the price was pushed up to 54 billion rand. And this is where people like Salim Essa started to feature. Nobody or very few people know that in that same time, Essa was appointed by Gigaba as a board member on Broadband Infraco. And he became...
Sorry, Rudie, it broke up.
Yes.
He was, Lucy appointed Salim Essa to what?
As a board member at Broadband Infraco. It's also an Essa communications environment. Now, just to come back to the appointments quickly, it was not only Gigaba and the new Transnet board, but there was a lot of other appointments that followed. And it is very interesting to see that if you want to see who was really involved with the Guptas, you must only go and see who went to the Oberoi Hotel in Dubai and who flew on ZS Oak, the Gupta private jet. We're thinking about people like Anosh Singh, Mashela Koko, Siabonga Gama, Des van Rooyen, Fana Shlongwane, later on Minister Mosebenzi Zwane, Daniel Mancha, who became the chair of the NEL, and so forth. So this whole group was people that were, I want to say, deployed at the SOEs to do all this work and to get contracts through and so forth. Coming back to the locomotives, and people also always want to know, but how much did they loot? What was the amounts involved? Now, we already know that only on the 1064 it was a 54 billion rand contract, but the 100 was also a 4.4 billion rand contract, and the 95 contract was also 2.7 billion rand. Now, the Chinese locomotive manufacturers got the biggest chunk of the pie, and all in all together they had to manufacture just over 700 locomotives for Transnet. Long story short, when these contracts were signed in March 2014, shortly after that, the first payments went through, advance payments from Transnet. 10%, and shortly after that, another 30% to the Chinese locomotive manufacturers. And we can see with evidence that we have, and this is reality again, see with evidence that we've got how this money, ended up with the Chinese and how they paid 20% of that to companies that ESA registered in Hong Kong. Regiments Asia and Tequesta Group Limited. And through these HSBC bank reports, we can see that $145 million ended up in the accounts of ESA. And this is only on the locomotive acquisition contracts. We are not talking about other contracts that the Guptas and ESA later on closed with Transnet, with Essop, with McKinsey, with the local regiments, etc. Just on this locomotive acquisitions, 145 to Tequesta and Regiments Asia. On the maintenance contract, the relocation, as well as money that went to other agents or middlemen in the UAE, the total amount that we've got evidence of at this stage is $284 million. Now, you can make your own calculations to see what is the rand value of that. But just on the 280, sorry, if you look at that and you look at the president's salary currently, you can, and if you give him no increase, you can pay the president of this country for 600 years with that money. It is just to try and explain to people, how much was looted. When the Transnet, when the locomotives, everything was in motion, what happened? They had to get more. And this is greed from a few individuals, and that caused the country a lot of damage. Locally in South Africa, they introduced regiments as a SD partner for McKinsey. They started off with consultancy contracts and advisory contracts, and between McKinsey and regiments in South Africa, another 2 billion rand went astray. And of that money, there's evidence as well. This is, again, it is a reality. We have got the evidence that about 70% of that, 700 million of the regiment's money ended up in Gupta accounts.
So Rudie, Ashraf, so Rudie's given some really good context to the detail that happens behind the scene. But in a nutshell, if you step back, state capture is about the capture of elements within the state, and it takes people in senior positions. In this case, it was the president, who made sure that appointments in the various cabinet positions that were going to spend money allocated in the budget to infrastructure development was going to be allowed to flow to certain service providers, to the state entities. And we saw that with SAA, with Transnet, as you can hear, Denel, the list goes on. And sadly, through this country has paid far more than it should for purchasing of locomotives, purchasing of power stations, purchasing of road infrastructure development, stadiums, the list goes on. And it's a very clever plot to use the state and to bring in businessmen, and you need to do the deals with these businessmen behind the scenes. And this was so clandestine, but so big, that those businessmen influenced, as Rudie will tell you, the appointment of people into senior positions in government to make sure that the contracts flowed where they should. So that's the overarching methodology or mechanism of state capture. And you can just see in one state institution like Transnet, how through this clever plan, they were able to siphon off what we can measure, and we know it's a lot more, over 3 billion rand, which flowed to the pockets of a few connected individuals. And we lose out as a state when this happens. And it's going on, as Rudie says, to this day. And that's the work that Outa does to uncover. We really have to stop this nonsense because we can't afford it anymore.
Yes. Can I just interject there? I see we're running out of time. This is a fascinating topic. It sounds like a James Bond novel. It looks like one of those action movies. You've given us a script. You've given us actors. I'd like to invite members of the public just now to see if they want to engage with you, because I'm sure the single question that is on everyone's mind is, what happens to all of these role players? And if I may precede the questions, how is it possible that a single individual, Ajay Gupta, as you mentioned, had this tremendous influence over very senior politicians that have come from grassroots level, that serve the people? And how, I mean, it's just so mind-boggling. Was there a script written and were we all just playing to the tune? Was there no oversight over any of these things? But I don't want to take the floor. We do have a number of people participating. And just for a few minutes, I think we're not going to be able to do justice to the topic tonight.
Yeah.
It's definitely going to be a repeat or a part 2, 3, or 4. So I just want to leave it now open to people, just to give a few minutes to them to see if they want to have any input. If there's nothing, we're going to continue with the rest of the conversation. The floor is open. Okay, I think people are stunned into silence by what they've heard. I myself I'm making notes here, Rudie, between theory and reality. Personally, look, it appears to me that the name that you've mentioned was also very, very circumspect. And I think Popo Molefe actually made that point publicly as well. And he said, this man caused all of this problem. Now, what is the hymn sheet? What's going to happen henceforth? I mean, you're saying you're going to lay charges, okay? What would the nature? Because look, charges are very technical in how you have to put them in terms of the NPA. And I understand the NPA is now prosecution driven. And I mean, there's nothing preventing the prosecution from calling on members of civil society like you to step forward and say, help us to put a charge together. There's nothing illegal about it. It's perfectly normal. I mean, if there's tremendous misunderstanding on a particular part of the law, let's say, for example, nuclear contracts are very complex, what's going to happen, etc. And the state can always call upon experts outside the state institutions, simply because I think the point that we must understand, sometimes prosecutions take long, but the state doesn't want to go in to lose a case. We must be patient with those. I think in the last week, we've seen tremendous steps by the NPA against, I think one of the regiment local guys has been charged. He's a well-known, I think they found lots of cash in one of his boxes as well. I think they brought an application. I think it was successful to try and freeze those accounts. But going forward, how do we see, because I think it's like a great movie and people want to see in the end the bad guys getting locked up. How are we going to see this, if at all?
I think if I can just say this, and then I'll ask Rudie to add to this, Ashraf. Another element of state capture is you can hijack the state institutions where the money spending is going, but you also need to hijack the prosecution process, the criminal justice system, because if you don't, then the people that are playing the game are going to be apprehended. And so what you need to do is capture those institutions, which they did very well in the NPA, and Rudie will share with you some of those thoughts. And they hollowed out that institution to the extent that this day, Shamila Batoy and Hermione Prunier are finding it very difficult to get the capacity up and the expertise up. But they're doing a very good job, and we've been engaging with them recently, last week, Shamila Batoy had a meeting with civil society movements, about 25, 30 of us, which we were part of, acknowledging extremely confidently that civil society has played a very important role, and the work that Rudie and his team have done and Outa have done has been very central to that. But yes, that institution was captured, and you saw month in and month out, year in and year out, how the heads of the NPA were changed, and eventually Sean Abrams was there, and he just kept everything at bay till he couldn't. And it takes a leadership change at the top to start undoing that, which is what Cyril Ramaphosa has started to do. I'm sure he could do it a lot faster, but that institution has been decimated, and now to get the wheels turning in the rule of law to flow again, it takes a lot longer. We would have hoped that the VBS stuff and all the stuff that's going to come to the fore now would have been addressed a year ago, but it's not that. It's not like flicking a light switch. But Rudie, I think you've got some more insights there. There is good work being done, and we think in time, given time and given the capacity, all those people that are being implicated should see their day in court. But you know, that's, I think, where Rudie talks about the reality and the theory. The theory is they should. The reality is going to be a different story. I think over to you, Rudie.
Thank you, Wayne. Ashraf, yes. Just from a practical point of view, also the question, and maybe to elaborate on what Outa did, is that we started to compile. What we tried to do was to compile a docket, not only to go to the police and lay a criminal complaint. What we tried to do from the word go, when we got the Gupta leaks, we tried to compile a docket so that they can have evidence that they can work on and can take further. We laid about 16 different criminal complaints, state capture related, at the Hawks in 2017 and 2018. Unfortunately, we had engagements with high-ranking officers there, and the message was always the same. It's still under investigation. We've combined these two cases. We've combined that docket with another complaint that was laid in at another station, and so forth. And then about a year ago, June, July last year, the ID Directorate of Advocate Cronje was still very young, and they engaged with us and said, listen, we know that you've got a lot of information. How can you assist us? And that was a door that opened for us, and we started to, instead of going to the police service and the Hawks and lay complaints, the NPA Act makes provision for what they call a referral, Section 27 referral, where you can, with an affidavit and annexures and evidence, you can take this matter straight to the NPA and straight to the ID. And that is what we have done. So we have revisited all those, not all of the cases, but a lot of those cases that we, laid complaints at the Hawks, or that they were busy with, and we converted that into new affidavits. And you must also know that last year, the information in our original affidavits were like old news, and we compiled the new dockets, new affidavits, and we said to the NPA, here you are, an affidavit of 200 pages and annexes of 2,000. And we can prove everything that we are saying in that affidavit. We're not only making laying a complaint. So what we did is we started off with this process. It worked very well for us, and so much so that we were approached by the NPA in terms of the NPA Act, and like you've said before, and they have approached us to assist them formally. And we hope, and Wayne can maybe elaborate on this, but we hope that we will have a formal memorandum of understanding within the next 2 or 3 weeks. And then we can really, participate in the active process. And that is really where we want to be, because we sit with information that we will think is not important at this stage, and that we don't even share, because we don't know what's the significance thereof. And so we are very happy about this process going forward, and that it's going to be formalized, and that we can assist the NPA and the law enforcement agencies in that way.
Okay, I'm grateful to know that we've got a bit more time. The time has been extended for us. I think it's such a gripping topic and so many angles to this. And hats off to you guys, I mean, for the work that you've done. I'm sure you've got organograms, and like the minister said, connect the dots and the bigger picture will emerge. But it's fascinating. First, let me give you a question here. Hi, Wayne. Is Outa going to take similar action against other directors in the SOEs as you did with Muyeni? Of course, Dudu Muyeni, the legal process ride out completely. So,
yeah, a good question. That case took us, bringing delinquent director cases is quite rare in this country. There aren't many. We've set a precedent. That was the first one where there was an actionable case. We had witnesses in the stand. Sometimes these cases are just fought on the papers. That was a big one because she chaired a state-owned institution in the midst of state capture. And we needed to test the waters to see how big this issue was and how the courts would respond. And it turned out exactly as we thought. That this was being taken seriously by the courts, despite the fact that Dudu Muyeni did a lot of the Stalingrad tactics to slow the process down and stay out of court as long as she can. The courts were very accommodating to make sure that that game didn't play out. And because it took so long and it was costly, that cost us several million rand, because getting witnesses here, getting senior counsel, building this case, it took a lot of effort. So what we've learned is how to do this smarter and faster and better. We are contemplating getting, and we're already engaging with a few people, trying to find, because as I said, this is costly. We need to find volunteers that have got legal experience, that are ex-senior people that have retired, to help us set up what we call a delinquent director initiative that can get information from the likes of Rudie and other whistleblowers that can show clear transgressions of the Companies Act, where the directors, both in state-owned institutions and in the private sector, have usurped the authority and done things that they should never have done. And yes, we would love to go after them, both in the private sector, where it falls within our mandate of corruption with state money, as well as in the public sector. There are a lot of these cases that can flow quite quickly. The biggest issue is capacity. I can assure you that our 45 staff, we are so stretched, even in this time of COVID. We've got a full remote working strategy in place. Even our switchboard operates remotely. And I think, I talked to a lot of people out there, and I know that your members will share with me that we thought that, in this lockdown environment, we would have a lot of time on our hands. Well, it's completely the opposite. We are all working flat out. The cases are coming at us all the time. And so it's a good thing in one sense. But we need, if we could double our capacity, I can assure you we'll have 85, 90 people doing this work, and we'll take on so many more of these state caps. So the intention is short answer to the question, absolutely. We want to make more people aware of the fact that they should be declared delinquent, and the pain they suffer is they cannot sit on boards, not in an executive position, not in a chair position, ever again, or for as long as the sanction is applied. And that is serious pain when it comes to people who rely and who want to be on these boards, because that's where they make their money.
All right.
Ashraf is...
So just to be clear, there's no criminal sanction. As you just pointed out, it's a civil sanction, and it really means that you can never be a director. It doesn't mean that you can't operate a business or sit as...
Rudie will tell you more. We do take these cases into the criminal space as well. But Rudie, you can elaborate on it.
Rudie?
Yes, just to answer you on that one, we have also made a referral, even before it was a court order, to the ID regarding the board at the time of Dudu Muyeni to the NPA. So they already have a referral. We have had the luxury of a lot of people that ex-SAA people work there, and who talked to us, and we had a lot of information that we could submit to the NPA. And then the court order came, and the court order, said exactly that, that these things are so serious that we must refer it, or that the court refers it to the law enforcement agencies. If I can just add on to something else that Wayne said, and talking about the delinquent director, I think what we have also done, and I think that is also an opportunity, not only for an organization like ours, but for is to look at to look at the professional bodies of the likes of auditors, lawyers, etc. What we have done is that we have submitted complaints to SAICA, Anosh Singh, for example, James Aguma, ex-CEO of the SABC, Yaki Kwinana, ex-board member on SAA, Pumeza Nansi was the CFO there. We have referred a matter to the Law Society of the Northern Provinces against Daniel Mancha, who was the chair of the board of the NEL. So that's also, an avenue that people and organizations can use to bring these people to book and to make sure that they are taken out of the active system where they operate.
May I just ask, seeing that there's such a constraint on the purse strings, on personnel, and without taking away any of the sterling work done, my understanding is that even in the UAE, the authorities are reluctant to act. And I'm sure you consider this, but perhaps if you can educate us. During the FBI investigation into the World Cup, where some of the participants had earned dollars, the FBI got on a plane, got the guy, took him to court. These were denominations, some of the mind-boggling figures of $2 billion and 350 or 254 in a single transaction in a bank didn't raise any questions from the banks. Surely the spider's web is bigger. So there's two parts of the question. Yes. What is the complicity of these international banks? And secondly, what, if any, help can the FBI give to the South African government in order to bring people to book?
Ashraf, I think to answer you on the second question, and Wayne can elaborate on the role of the banks, but we were in the fortunate position, like I said, that because we had this history with the Gupta leaks, and not only the Gupta leaks, a lot of other information that we got through time as well. We were also contacted by foreign law enforcement agencies like the FBI, agencies in Britain, Australia, and so forth, where we shared our information with them, and we are still, in conversations with them. So I can assure you that, this is not an isolated incident. We were also invited to the FATF 40 evaluation to South Africa. Wayne, myself, and another colleague went there, and we shared what we found with them, and interesting things coming out there. For a simple thing is that anybody listening tonight can book what we call a company warehouse. You can buy a company, it's registered already. In half a day, you've got a company registered in your name. And there's no oversight, real oversight on that. And that was one of the FATF 40, the problems that they had, is that, we can establish or register a company just like that. One of the companies, for example, that received money through this looting process of Salim Essa and Regiment's money, a South African company, and our investigation showed that this guy's ID number does not exist at Home Affairs. So now you're sitting with real problems. This company should never have been registered. It's a company that was registered quite recently, and we all know that nowadays you can register a company electronically. But this company specifically was registered manually. And somebody slipped up, never checked this guy's ID, never checked, didn't do the so-called FICA test. And this is how these things slip through. Open up a bank account. He's part of the process of looting the money and distributing and laundering the money. And so the problem is wider than just the people working there. It is the networks that they have. And if you look at the Salim Essa network specifically, I can tell you that there are hundreds of people in that network. A guy with a business here, a cash and carry in Makadu, for example, and a person down in Cape Town will receive money from him and he will pay it out again. And it is not easy to trace that money because you must follow up. It's by dates, by amounts. People hold back a small percentage, and that's how they work for themselves just to do this job. And then you get one guy with 7 companies, and he's part of the first, the second, the third layer. So it is very difficult to follow the money, but the network was established, and it is like at the CIPC where we need stricter oversight in that. And I think Wayne, I'll answer you on the banks.
Yeah, look, just in a nutshell, if you or I try and pay something in cash or a transaction of R500,000, you get phone calls from the bank. What is this for? What are you buying? Yet we see billions of rands, multi-million rand transactions taking place with companies that are new, that have got no history, and yet the banks turned a blind eye to so many of these transactions for far too long here in South Africa. And only in the end did they clamp down and stop transacting on behalf of the Guptas. But until then, they had to know that something was amiss. The Reserve Bank was stopping money from flowing out the country, asking questions. And when they stopped some of these money flows, the people that were paying those amounts of money didn't even question that the money was being put on hold or frozen or confiscated. They just carried on doing it. I mean, if you or I transacted with a company in China and you paid out 40 million rand and the Reserve Bank stopped the transaction and held it back until you answered and you didn't come after that money, that alone says something's wrong here. And these are the types of transactions that were happening in our banks under our noses here. We've seen, as Rudie said, in Hong Kong, HSBC dealing with multi-million-dollar transactions that the money was just flowing, and these companies weren't registered properly. Even the companies that received the money had wrong or fictitious registration numbers. I mean, this is mind-blowing that with all our banking laws around the world, this should still be happening today. And you know what happens, Ashraf? Sadly, and you see it around the world, these banks pay billions of dollars. I think the last count was $240 billion have been paid in fines by the banks. But nobody is arrested. None of the CEOs of those banks, not their executives, are taken to task, and they just get quietly moved out. They take their money, a new CEO is put in, or a new executive in the bank, and they continue to allow this money laundering to take place around the globe. And the result is that far too much money is lost to the systems of governments, and the people that suffer the most when these money laundering experts who have this modus operandi come into Africa and they steal our money, your money, my money, that we've worked hard for to pay over the government to run this country. It's just mind-blowing that the banks have the systems to stop this, and they still don't do it. So we must go after the banks as well. They're very complicit in this problem.
Gentlemen, I unfortunately have to inform you we've run out of time. It was a fascinating discussion, something that we're going to have to revisit. And it's almost, it's almost bittersweet. It's sweet because we now understand for the first time what really happened. But it's bitter because we've identified the culprits and there's nothing you can do at this stage. The legal process is very slow. The NPA needs help. You need help. As you pointed out, so many parties were complicit in this. It's almost as if there's one rule for the ordinary man and another rule for the politically and money connected people. But we live in hope and we look for justice because the truth is always one that will survive and darkness will perish. So thank you very much for your time. I really admire your commitment and I hand it to you. I don't have much to offer. I know a little bit about immigration law. I know when people's matters come to the fore. I'm quite stunned to find out that some chief role players in state capture are still employed by the department in places around the world, and they facilitated a lot of these things. So, you know, where we needed genuine skills for the country to grow, it was denied, and then everyone else that they wanted to come here to run this or that enterprise was allowed in at the flick of a pen. So if there's anything I can do, Wayne, I've told you this before, that's my area of law. You're quite welcome to give me a call. I know that's probably, you know, just one tiny bit of this whole web, but I take off my hat to you both. Strength to your organization. You know, may God protect you people from any mishap, and you know, give you courage and fortitude in what you're doing. And may many people flock to your doors, both with their purses and their skills, and say, I'm ready to serve. If there's a single thing that a person affected by this, and ordinary citizens affected by this can say, is not, Wayne, here's my 50 Rand or 100 Rand. Wayne, I'm here to serve. What can I do?
Yeah.
And,
so Ashraf, in that regard, we really thank you, and just want to remind you and your listeners out there that that we are only as good as our supporter base out there. We've got tens of thousands of people that give us a small amount of money every month, and I just want to leave you with this one saying by, I think Edmund Burke said it, that the biggest mistake is made by the person who gives nothing because he thought he could only give a little. And that applies in this time of crisis. And that's how Outa survives. Don't think your 120 Rand a month won't make a difference. It makes a big difference, because if everybody felt that way, we wouldn't have an Outa. And so tens of thousands of people giving us small amounts of money is the crowdfunding mass that makes it possible for us to employ these specialists to do this work. So, and all our supporters feel proud of the fact that they are active citizens. And it takes 5 minutes on the outa.co.za website. You go in there and you can load your details. And we really appreciate every bit of contribution we get. Thank you so much for that, Ashraf.
you're welcome. Rudie?
Thank you, Ashraf. Yes, from my side, thank you very much for the opportunity. And I would love to have more of these sessions. And maybe, you know, we can clamp down on a specific topic and go through that. Just one other thing that I want to add is that information is another form of collateral for Outa. So, you know, if there's people out there that knows who, you know, of things that's going on, and come to talk to us, you know, speak to people of your organizations, get us in contact with these people, because information is collateral in a fight like this. So I encourage people to speak up when they experience wrongdoings by the PISM, by the government.
Thank you.
Thank you very much, and thanks to Minara for arranging this wonderful initiative. We've learned so much. We wish you speed and strength in what you're doing. And to all our participants tonight, thank you very much for your active participation. We really appreciate it. Give your support to Outa, they need it. Thank you. Assalamu alaikum and good night.